So the other day, we briefly went over the new supers and aspects when just talking about our general thoughts of the final shape when we played it a few weeks ago at Bungie. Today though, we're going to be breaking down those 3 new supers and those 3 new aspects based on our testing there. Now we're getting one for each class. And funny enough, when final shape was first revealed to us, we thought this was it. We thought this was literally all we were going to get this expansion. Of course, now we know all about Prismatic and everything that's coming with it. Yes, we're going to be doing a deep dive on the Prismatic subclasses and those exotic class items. And despite that being the big focus of the final shape, guys, let me just say, these additions, especially the supers, are so good. You are going to love these supers, both in PvE and in PvP, unless you're a hunter, and primarily in PvP, but your aspect is fantastic. Now, full disclosure, this was captured 2 weeks ago. It's a pre-release build, meaning things are subject to change from now until then. Personally, as soon as the final shape goes live and we get through the campaign and do all that other stuff, I'm going to be damage testing these supers very quickly. But we're going to kick things off though with our Solar Warlocks. Here we have Song of Flame. This is our new super. And Hellion, which is our new matching aspect. Now this new super reads, unleash your inner fire, making your equipped weapons radiant and enhancing your abilities. Release a supercharged melee attack that launches additional projectiles. Create a sentient flame wisp that seeks out targets and detonates in a scorching explosion, then seeks out other nearby targets. Now while Song of Flame is active, you and nearby allies regenerate abilities more quickly. You're also more resistant to incoming damage, and your solar and kinetic weapons scorch targets. Now you heard that right. Your solar and kinetic weapons scorch targets. Somebody break out Microcosm, right? Now looking at the super, yes, this is very much like Sunsinger from back in D1 minus the self-res, but you gotta understand, back in the day, I used to rock Sunsinger, not for the self-res. Actually, I would utilize it with Radiant Skin and essentially just run around killing everything with my grenades and my melee. The difference was back then, you didn't have a custom grenade like you do here. That wisp is custom to this super, and things are incredibly spammy, as you can see. Now this wisp causes a ton of scorch, and it does some pretty chunky damage. And then our melee becomes a beefed up version of our incinerator snap that has more projectiles and thus more scorch. And we utilize this inside of PvP, and I felt like we couldn't be killed. The damage resist is very nice, and the tracking on that wisp is also very forgiving. Now I would say that ability regeneration is similar to that of like Apotheosis Veil right now. It also says that this applies to allies, but unfortunately we were playing this as a solo player, so I wasn't able to gauge how much it was helping teammates, nor was I really communicating with my folks that were playing PvP with me. So I couldn't really tell how much it was benefiting them. But it seems like it's gonna play a support role alongside also being pretty lethal. Now, if you're not spamming your abilities, again, any solar or kinetic weapons that we have will also apply Scorch. Now, this is something I'm definitely gonna have to circle back to because I was too focused on just using the abilities itself. But my God, guys, if the Scorch stacks are literally the same between the two, or if they can double up, can you imagine? Can you imagine sitting there with Skyburner's Oath or Polaris Lance or Prometheus Lens applying double the Scorch? I'm not sure if that's the case, but that's definitely something we need to test. But this is what the devs were referencing way back when they said that this new super would buff our solar weapons. Now, this may not seem as important for your primary solar weapons, but you can imagine something like this in your damage rotation with weapons like Dragon's Breath. If it adds a significant amount of Scorch stacks, Dragon's Breath may become even more meta than what it is right now. If it's proccing an extra ignition, perhaps even double the ignitions. Oh, that's crazy. And of course, you can rotate this in with the damage of the super itself. It hurts my soul to even like talk about this right now because it's not until after I come home with this gameplay that I'm like, damn it, Cross, you couldn't have thought to try these other things when you had the opportunity? I let you down, fellas. I know. I promise to make it up to you next week. Now, the reason why I think this super is going to gain popularity is because Well of Radiance is getting hit pretty hard. Now, are folks still going to use Well of Radiance? Absolutely. There are going to be ways to work and navigate around this. People are going to double stack it with Stag. You're going to have folks using Renewal Grass and throwing down a Dustfill Grenade while you're standing in a well for that extra damage resist. And in some ways, Well's kind of getting a buff, considering you could take the buff outside of it. But Song of Flame may actually be something we utilize over Well of Radiance in certain encounters. And again, what we're utilizing it here is on the Prismatic kit. We're not even utilizing it within its own solar kit. When we start double stacking Scorch and Ignitions and that AoE damage. Don't get me wrong, guys. I love Prismatic. I'm just saying, if I wanted to specialize in a certain verb, in this case, Ignitions and Scorch, then of course, I would still want to rock Solar 3.0 and all of its associated aspects and fragments. Speaking of aspects, Hellion. This one reads, activate your class ability to summon a solar mortar that lobs flaming projectiles at distant targets. Targets targets damaged by the mortar are scorched. There it is, guys. We have a solar buddy. Now, he puts out pretty good. The aim could be a bit better, but the mortar part of the description feels very apt. As you can see, it just lobbing those shots across the map at things. Now, you can imagine this synergizing perfectly with things like Ember of Singeing. This, of course, increases our class ability regeneration when we scorch enemies. So literally utilizing that with this solar buddy will feed right back into itself. Now, again, both this aspect and the super will be present on Prismatic. So fret not, because you can, of course, pair this with Facet of Hope, which achieves similar functionality. Now, something you can do with Prismatic is you can pair this with Getaway Artist and Hellion. See, Getaway Artist allows you to spawn an arc soul when you consume your arc grenade. And yes, you could do both those things. Cast your class ability, eat thy grenade, boom! You've got two buddies. I don't know about you, but back in the day, one of my favorite things to do back in Oblivion and Skyrim was level up Conjuration. Dude, when you maxed out Conjuration in Skyrim or Oblivion, it got to a point where you just didn't fight. You just summoned thy summons and they did everything for you. I don't know why, but I find this playstyle very appealing. Now moving on to our Titans. The new additions for Titans are going to affect the Void element. Our brand new Void super is called Twilight Arsenal. The description for this reads, summon 3 Void axes and throw them at your foes one after another. On impact, the axes pull in nearby targets and detonate in a weakening explosion. After exploding, the axes can be picked up by you or your allies and used as a weapon for a short time. Now these axes are pretty powerful, at least from our playtime. They do a chunky amount of damage. The first axe will actually cause weaken, and the next 2 will deal increased damage because of that weakened enemy. Now, just like it says in the description, after throwing the axes, you can then pick them up and use it as a melee weapon. Your teammates can pick them up too. You can pick them up. The axes have 10 ammo in them when you pick them up, so you can actually run around and use it as a melee weapon or throw it. And you'll get a buff when you pick it up called Twilight Axe with a timer signifying how long it will last. Now, there's also a chance this gives us some other buff like damage resist, but we'll test that next week. What's awesome about these axes though is that the melee attack itself also applies weaken. So you can go in there, hit him with a melee attack, apply thy weaken, and then throw the axe, which will consume all the ammo, of course, but do a big chunk of damage. Now, these axes, they last for a good while. I mean, a good while. Inside of PvP, people were killing us with these supers, and then those axes just chilled, and they could just run up to them, pick them up, and kill us on spawn. It's not that difficult if you're going up against one Titan, but against an entire team of Twilight Arsenal Titans, it's kind of hell to deal with. No lie. And there's no limit to how many axes you grab. You can literally pick one up, throw it, pick the next one up, throw it again. The only thing that I was not allowed to do was pick up my enemy's axe, which is really unfortunate. Now, the next addition is the aspect Unbreakable. This reads, hold to summon a Void Shield and block a portion of incoming damage, gradually draining your grenade energy and granting an overshield over time. Releasing the grenade input or running out of energy releases a frontal blast from your shield that deals increased damage based on how much damage was blocked. Combatants that come in contact with your shield are temporarily disoriented. Now, I did get to test this. Unfortunately, it was during gameplay that we're not allowed to show right now. Think of it as like a mini Ursa Furiosa. Personally though, guys, it was kind of weak. I'm just saying. Maybe I wasn't blocking enough damage with it. So at least offensively, I wasn't that impressed with it. At the same time, it's one of those things like you're in trouble, you need to immediately block. You don't have super, of course, to get out of that situation. So you consume your grenade and you block, maybe to get a res or something. I understand the appeal, but I mean, from an offensive point of view, I wasn't blown away with that like explosive damage on the front end. Now, there is going to be a lot of ways to synergize this with Prismatic as well as Ursa Furiosa itself, as that is going to synergize. You could pair this with Facet of Purpose while rocking Berserker. You could stack things like Woven Mail from orbs and Void Overshields from your grenades. So the survivability is there. The question is this worth using over just using your grenade? You know what I'm saying? That's kind of the situation that I'm in. Now, the other thing is that I did not get to test. Can you consume your Prismatic grenade? Now, that is something we're gonna have to check out. Now, finally, to our hunters. We have 2 new arc abilities. One is the Storm's Edge super. The other is the Ascension aspect, which I really, really liked. A lot of people were overlooking this aspect, but during one of the gameplay sessions in which I was not allowed to capture, this was the aspect I was using over and over, and it was disgusting. But let's talk about Storm's Edge first. It reads, summon an electrifying dagger and throw it in your aim direction. When the dagger hits a surface or a target, you blink to its location and perform a powerful rolling strike, damaging any nearby targets. Now, it can be reactivated after the strike to perform additional throws. If the dagger flies for long enough without impacting anything, it detonates and you blink to the detonation location. Now, guys, this super is so fast. The animation animation is almost impossible to counter. No, it's not going to be crazy on the DPS charts. We're talking about PvP here, you guys. The immediate teleportation right up to an enemy, the ginormous AoE hit when coming out of it, that spin to win, kind of like what they did with the Solar Super for Warlocks. This is essentially Blade Dancer, but way better. The area of effect is way larger than Destiny 1's Blade Dancer Showstopper Super variants. That one would literally just kill people like within knife's distance of you. I think back when D1 first released, maybe it had a bigger AoE effect, but at least from my memory, in like year 2, year 3, Showstopper really wasn't impressive. This is nothing like that. This is way better than Showstopper on literally every single level. If you see a hunter throw that knife at you, the only way you may be able to stop it is if you time literally the most perfect freeze. And even that, I don't even know if you could stop it with that. Dodging away from it, you're not going to survive. The AoE is just too big. It's too quick. This is definitely a super my PvP hunters are going to be utilizing. You can imagine throwing this knife into a group of enemies that are trying to hold a cap point inside of PvP and instantly just shred them all. Now let's talk about Ascension. We showcased this a bit in our Hunter Exotics video, but I was really impressed with this aspect and I wasn't expecting a whole lot. It states that while airborne, you consume your class ability energy to summon your arc staff, propelling yourself upwards and creating a burst of energy that amplifies allies and jolts targets. Now this is the premier way to become amplified and jolt enemies, and it's got a huge AoE effect. Now it says also in the description that it amplifies allies, and this of course overlaps to yourself. Now I was utilizing this in my first play session that we weren't allowed to record, but I was utilizing this with Stylish Executioner and Gerfalcons, and I would just go invisible immediately after jolted enemies with Stylish. I would come out of it, I would have Volatile for my void weapons, and we would just go to Pound Town. And if you want to talk about synergy, within our Prismatic subclass, you've got it, man. In our Transcendence description, it says, we get Transcendent energy from applying subclass buffs to our allies. Now, of course, I didn't get to test this, but assuming that this is a substantial amount, Ascension is going to be amazing. I'm just letting you know from my own personal playthrough, and I'm not a hunter main. I was really impressed with this aspect. So guys, that is our breakdown for the 3 new supers and 3 new aspects that are, of course, non-prismatic. But keep in mind, all of these will be present on our prismatic kits as well. If you'd like to check out any of our other Final Shape reviews, gameplay, or just general thoughts, we have an entire playlist down below, guys. I'm really looking forward to next week because yes, we did get to test a lot of these, but when we start kitting these things out, going into the raid, going into the new activities, that right there is what's really going to be putting these to the test. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.